Welcome to the first episode of the Doug Deep Dive, an interview series highlighting the community of the DayzUnderground server. Our first guest is a longtime member of the Doug community that once played the iconic character Toronto, and currently you can find him in-game on his memorable character Waldorf. In this episode, we discuss the life and death of Toronto, thoughts on the current state of DayzUnderground, playing DayZ as a solo, and so much more, including a visit from one of Toronto's old friends. Thank you for listening, and we hope you join us on DayzUnderground, the way DayZ is meant to be played.
The seriousness of the RP is what I loved about Toronto, but I also kind of love the fact that I'm away from it now. It was tough, like dealing with that, and like I get it. It's a game. Here I am, like a 50-year-old guy getting kind of emotional about a character that I played in a game.
Like thinking back on the way Andy did it and having her sob her eyes out to me, telling me she loved me before she pulled the trigger.
They're goddamn pogging and dabbing and capping and everything. Looking back on it, it makes me kind of emotional just thinking about it.
All right, so we'll start off with the first question. I'll read it, and then you can take it away from there and explain why you wanted it to be the first question.
All right, fire away.
So British Paul says, why after all these years on Doug can you still not shoot a zombie from 15 meters?
Well, the short answer to that is because I suck. I don't play games like this. I'm old. I'm an older gamer. I've been playing games for the majority of my adult life, but I started playing single player Arma because I never ever played games like this. I never played growing up. I didn't play multiplayer games. They weren't available. I started playing single player Arma because it fascinated me, and I got sucked into the DayZ mod from that. Now, to give you some sort of an idea of how long or how old I am, I was about 40 when I started playing Arma. So the DayZ mod came out in when did DayZ mod come out? 2012?
Beginning of 2012, maybe
right,
middle of
right.
2012.
So I was already in my 40s there. So you can do the math and figure it out.
Jesus Christ.
I have my glasses on right now because I'm reading these questions on my screen, but I generally don't wear my glasses when I'm playing. So that might give British Paul and the rest of you a little idea as to how bad I am at PvP. When I do play other games similar to this, which I really haven't done for like 10 or 15 years, I play single player. I don't generally do PvP. And I think that's good for people to understand, because you don't need to know how to PvP to play DayZ, especially on Doug. Matt, you've probably seen my what do you kids call it? The KD ratio?
Yeah. I mean, I haven't looked it up personally, but I could.
Mine is quite impressive, because I can count the number of times that I have killed somebody out of self-defense on Doug on probably two hands, and so. But
I'm right there with you.
Yeah, well, I know you are, but I still think I'm a lot worse. You could look that up and maybe flash it on the screen later. But yeah, it's pretty. Some people might think that it's sad, but I enjoy the world that Doug has created, and you don't need to KOS. You don't need to kill people. You can get by in this world by being interesting, by talking your way out of things. You're going to get killed, of course. It's still DayZ, but I can't PvP, and I've loved DayZ and Doug for 10 years. So there's your answer, BP.
Yep. There you go, BP. Yeah, when he deleted it, I was like,
no,
don't delete it. I was like, that's a solid question. I was like, why do you suck at the game and you still play it 10 years later?
It's a totally legit question, and like I sometimes do get embarrassed by it.
Sometimes
The
the adrenaline's pumping. You just can't fucking aim.
exactly the video that I put up this last week of those crackheads up in Chennai Polana. It's embarrassing, but when that gunfight was over, I just laughed. It's something that I wanted to share. Like I got the guy eventually. It took me 5 shots, and unfortunately, they were the only 5 shots left in my revolver. But I got the guy eventually. It just wasn't enough to kill him. It was only enough to knock him out. So no, it was fun, and like I said, I love the world that Doug has created, and being a part of that, and to be a part of it, you don't need to. I'm not going to say you don't need to shoot people, because of course you need to shoot people.
Sometimes, yeah.
Yeah, it's like I said, it's a legitimate question, and that's the answer. There was a time not that long ago, maybe 3 or 4 months ago. I was running back up from the coast, and I ran through Gorka, through the area of Gorka, and Dam caught me and decided they were going to escort me up to the Weapon Emporium. And we ran into some wolves on the way, and they wanted me to take care of them. And it was embarrassing, but it was hilarious. Must have whiffed every single shot that I took, and they were mocking me the whole time. They eventually took care of it. And, we never really spoke of it again, but like it did embarrass me in the moment.
Yeah, it's still a moment though. You know?
Exactly. Like, the old man can't shoot, and I was like, yeah, I'm not wearing my glasses. I found these at a grandmother's house, for God's sake. Do you think these are my goddamn prescription?
All right, we'll move on to the next one from Dill, since I actually really like this question because I
Yeah.
also don't know too much about Toronto, because
Yep.
I was only around for a little bit, and I only ran into you maybe once or twice, and I wasn't Matt at the time. She says, I don't know too much about Toronto, and I'm curious about what Toronto was like as a character, and how much time in between playing Toronto and Waldorf was there, and how the hell did you end up on Waldorf from
All
a
right.
character like Toronto?
All right. So this is going to be a long story. So
Go for it.
buckle in. My first character on Doug, and I don't even. I'm surprised that nobody mentioned, how did you find Doug, and what did you think of it when you first started playing. But I'm going to kind of cover that here. So my first character on Doug was actually I just used my nickname when I used to play baseball, which was Shaky. We created a group in Svetlo. There was three of us, and I started there, and I was just hanging out in Svetlo, and a couple of people joined me, and they ended up playing for a while. We call ourselves the Saviors of Svetlo, and I was Shaky. We were kind of lightly aligned with the Guardians, when the Guardians were in the Northeast taking care of St. Joe's and the surrounding area. And Shaky was eventually killed during a war with some psychos. I can't remember what the hell were their names. It's Dirty Dan and his group. So yeah, Shaky was killed. I perma Shaky, and I kind of came back as the same character, but with no memory of anything. And I called him Toronto. But when I came back, like I did something when Shaky got killed, which was I kind of like cut off all in-game communication with the group that I was with, and I decided I was going to go find them with no memory of them. They had moved, and I spent a couple of months, wandering the north, looking for them. I talked to them a little bit out of game, but they were like friends in game. I didn't know where they were. I didn't want them to tell me where they were. I wanted to hear about it and find them. In the time that I was looking for them, I came across the Guardians, and their leader, his name was Yari. They told me, if you're ever in the Northeast and you want to stay here, you can, join us. And I eventually found the Saviors. They found a place down south. At this point, they were all kind of getting out of playing on Doug as much as they used to. I decided, this isn't really going to work. So I went back up, and I joined the Guardians, and the rest of the Saviors. Who was it? It was Michael, Beretta, Turtle. They all kind of stopped playing for a while. So I joined the Guardians, and anybody who knows anything about the Guardians on Doug, like they were a good group. Farmers generally. I'm not going to say pacifists, because those guys could hold their own. They had an alliance with the Firekeepers. People familiar with Doug lore know about the Firekeepers and Tex Rockwolf and Dixie and all that. So I had joined the Guardians, probably 2 or 3 months after I joined the Guardians, and it had worked my way into being like a real part of this group. One of the saviors, his name was Michael. Oh, before I get to that story, there was another one of the saviors. His name was Turtle, who joined the Guardians with me. And then Michael came back, and I don't think he was really planning on coming back to do anything. He just kind of came back and was on the radio being all creepy, saying that Toronto had deserted the Saviors and that he was out for revenge and he'd gone crazy and all this. This lasted a couple of days, and then we went to confront Michael in Svetlagers. Michael and somebody else, who I'm not going to mention, somebody else laid a trap for the Guardians, and they actually shot and permaned the leader of the Guardians. His name was Yari. And when that happened, that was one of the most. And I'm going to mention this now because I'm not going to talk about it in the memorable experiences. When Yari permaned, Yari was a role player, like one of the greatest role players that Doug has ever had. I think.
Is that Purple Manatee?
Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
Then
Yep.
yes. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. When Michael and this other, I think there was actually two other characters, laid this trap and killed Yari. I was in comms, and I don't do that very often, but because this was a story about me and about Michael wanting revenge on Toronto for abandoning the Saviors. I was in comms with the Guardians at this time, and when Yari got shot, he didn't tell anybody he was going to do this, but he had already had it in his mind that the next time he got shot in RP, I guess is the best way to say it, he was going to perma. And when he got shot, he disconnected. It was just fucking like shocking. Like we're like in comms, we're like, Yari, you there? And he was gone. And
that's awesome.
oh yeah, it like that. This is why I wanted to mention
panic.
this now. Yeah, this is why I wanted to mention this now because I'm not going to mention in the most memorable experience. It's one of my most memorable ones. From there, with Yari gone, the Guardians no longer have leadership. They eventually decided on putting somebody named Kyle in charge of the Guardians. Kyle and I did not get along in game because Kyle had done some things that my character Toronto disagreed with vehemently, to the point where I was pretty much saying to Kyle on a regular basis, "Here's a bullet, put it in your head." Um, so with Yari gone, Kyle became leader of the Guardians because he was the longest serving, and he was also an excellent RPer. Turtle and I decided we were going to leave the Guardians. We turned in our armbands and we left. And Turtle wasn't playing very often at the time, anyways. But I was still there, and I decided I was going to leave the Guardians. But because Yari took me in, that I owed it to the Guardians to keep looking after St. Joe's. So I was no longer a Guardian, but I was looking after St. Joe's. Eventually, the rest of the Guardians and their alliance with the Firekeepers and the Firekeepers and everything kind of fell apart, and people left, and it happens. It's the evolution of things on Doug. With the Guardians gone, the Firekeepers gone, and pretty much no big groups left in the Northeast, I was kind of left to my own to take care of St. Joe's, and that's what
I don't know
did.
what that's like at all.
Yeah, I know. You know a lot. You actually, there's so much of your story that's like mimicking the Toronto story. I love it. I really do. And so when I was alone, taking care of St. Joe's, and like it was like my burden because I felt responsible. Toronto felt responsible for the death of Yari, because it was my best friend looking for me that did it. I took that burden on. And for anybody who wants to see what it was like, Justin's old
series,
his series starts right around the time that I was left alone there. It was my burden to carry now. That whole time, from the time that the Guardians all left and I was alone to Toronto's death at the hands of Darkest Midnight Wellbeing, while being hunted by the cult of Papa. That lasted about 2 years, and Justin, I was so happy that Justin documented that, and it's one of the amazing things I think about DayZ Underground is, my story was just my own. It was pretty private, but Justin's story kind of like overlapped mine, and he managed to capture an outside view of the last 8 months or however long it was of Toronto's life. And I just, as Toronto, I just wanted to help people. I just wanted to live up to what I think Yari would have wanted. That's kind of that's kind of what Toronto was like. And a little backstory here, which I think is going to help better explain a lot that's what's coming. What's the next question here?
Well, part of that was
How much time?
Yeah, in between.
Okay. So the end of Toronto's life, like I said, I had made a mortal enemy of Darkest Midnight and Vriska after and this is what I've always found kind of amusing is that anybody who's familiar with Doug lore knows about the St. Joe's Fifth Fry. For people that aren't aware, myself and actually Yari's new character hosted a fish fry at St. Joe's. We decided, this was going to be open. We weren't going to have any security or anything. And a lot of people showed up at this fish fry, and it started to rain. And so everybody went into the barn. A unknown person ran in with a cooking pot bomb and dropped it in the middle and must have killed about 15 people. Now nobody permitted or anything off this. Looking back, it was actually kind of hilarious. But that whole thing set into motion the end of Toronto's life. Toronto found out that it was Darkest Midnight, or at least some members of Darkest Midnight, that was responsible for it, and a character called Vriska, who was not officially a member of Darkest Midnight, but was kind of like a hanger-on with them and a hanger-on with Dugout. And I don't say that in a bad way or not. I
give Vriska shit all the time. It's fine.
I'm gonna get back to this later, but Vriska was and still is one of my favorite characters.
He's a menace.
Yeah, he's a total menace. The fish fry bombing put the end of Toronto's life into motion. Like I made it Toronto's mission that Darkest Midnight was going to pay for this. Now I was one person going up against Darkest Midnight when they were at their zenith. There was probably like 12 members at that point. There was not much I was going to actually do, but
it's more fun that way sometimes.
Yeah, exactly, and the anger that I had for them, and also during this time between the fish fry and the end of Toronto's life was multiple interactions with the cult of Papa. And the cult of Papa they're still doing the same thing where they will find, a tortured individual and try to get into their head. And they did that with Toronto. And oh man, those guys are freaking amazing. They really are. And for anybody who hasn't seen this either, Reverend Alessandro has a video which you could find.
I'll link it. I'll put a link in there.
Yeah. It's called Scars Across Toronto, an organic roleplay experience, which I'm actually looking at on my other screen right now, just so that I can kind of remember what happened here. During that video, it's just me and Alessandro talking about everything that's happened since the fish fry and the cult of Papa. And the cult of Papa, saw something in Toronto, a weakness, and we're picking at it and picking at it and picking at it. And I was being tortured by them. I was the enemy of Darkest Midnight. Everything just started, totally collapsing on me until finally, after actually capturing me a couple of times and miraculously something happened that I got away, Darkest Midnight got me, and they had Cape blow me up in a barn. And
What a way to
that
go.
was the ironic thing is it's actually the barn that she blew me up in is actually Waldorf bunker now. So
Oh, that's funny.
I did not plan that, but it just kind of happened that as I started Waldorf's life, and he spent some time living outside of Sparograd, with just outside of Black Cross, and I moved back east because, like, personally, I wanted to be closer to somebody who I really enjoyed playing with, and I just kind of adopted that barn, which was the barn that Toronto got blown up in. I sometimes even make comments about it in
References.
character. Yeah, about the brain matter that I pick out of the floorboards in there, and so on. So how much time was there in between from the time that Toronto was killed until I started playing Waldorf was probably about a month.
Oh, it's not long at all. I figured it'd be a little longer than that. Yeah.
It wasn't. I fooled around with some other characters. Like Toronto was me, and that's
Yeah.
why like everything was so personal about it. Waldorf is there's some of me in Waldorf, but I'm really not that angry and disgruntled.
Don't lie.
Yeah, but yeah,
I
there
filmed
wasn't.
that video with you. That you were pretty angry and disgruntled.
Which one? Last night?
The 10-year. No, last night
Oh
was
yes.
fun.
Oh yeah. Last night was fun. But yeah, there was, I tried to, I tried another character that was similar to Toronto, but the thing that I loved so much about playing Toronto was that, you know, I was Toronto. I was either Toronto or Shaky, and they're kind of one and the same for about 7 years, I think. And the lore that character had, I think made him really important. And I love that. I love that about him. Like, people would stop by St. Joe's, and I would just tell stories. And I can't really do that with. I'm starting to get to the point now with Waldorf where I can tell Thor stories, but Waldorf kind of tells them differently, where everything is bullshit.
Yeah.
And yeah, and made up, and
Fucking government, man.
the government or the wildlife.
Yeah.
Waldorf now, well, yeah, Waldorf now has a lot of problems with the wildlife, and some of it isn't even wildlife. It's things that he's gotten into his head that
Starting to lose it, old man.
oh yeah, he totally is. He totally is. So I don't know if that really answers the question on how on earth did I land on Waldorf. I don't. Waldorf originally started as, and I think we've talked about this before. Waldorf started as Walt Kowalski from Gran Torino,
Oh, okay, yeah.
which
Get
is a
off
movie
my
that
lawn.
which is a movie that I like absolutely love. And he started as that, but like if I really went full Walt Kowalski, I would have been kicked off Doug probably in a week. So I had to dial it back a little bit and play it a little bit more for humor. And then I started to realize I'm turning into Waldorf and Stadler from
Yeah.
from the Muppet Show. So I just went with Waldorf. That's
I,
how I ended up there.
I have a little bit of a surprise for you. One second.
Yeah, I saw you pop in, and I figured I need to go get a beer because this is going to be a long conversation now.
Okay, so I was John Stalvern. I'm not anymore. I died. um, yeah, and what? I was racking my brain to actually think about the first interaction that I can remember having with you, Toronto, and it's really difficult because, like, I'm pretty sure I must have met you around about St. Joe's or in the northeast, right? And
Yeah, yeah.
it was roundabout because I had first joined the server, and now it must have been about what? It was either late 2015 or mid 2016, but it was around about that time-ish. And at the time I joined, the server was kind of like, so you had the Guardians, of which Toronto was part of, and you had the Firekeepers, and they were quite buddy, quite close, and always kind of hung out in the northeast. I joined and just kind of was just roaming around as a solo, kind of getting the lay of the land kind of thing. And I bumped into the MFSG, the Morgan Freeman Spiritual Group, and they were the first bunch of people that I bumped into, and they lived out somewhere in Cabanino in the church. So they were the first friendly people that I bumped into, and I met up with firekeepers and guardians through them because we went to various meetings. Because at the time, there was a group called the Gilligan Gang that were essentially back then they were like damn, but they were like times 10 more aggressive.
Yeah, they. I went through the story of my first real character, which was kind of just like a trial run for Toronto. He was called Shaky. He was a member of a group based out of Svetlo, and it was the Gilligans that permitted him. So I was trying to remember the name and I couldn't get it. So thank you.
Was that the Saviors? The Saviors of Sven? Okay, yeah. So when I joined, all that kind of malarkey had just maybe happened a few months previous to me joining the server, but I had got the lay of the land after meeting MFSG and then various meeting all the other like good factions, peaceful guys, like the friendlier people. And me joining, being a kind of PvPer but interested in RP and being more of a kind of like good guy character. I just want to hang out with the good guys and fight the bad guys. So I bumped into Toronto around about that time, and he just seemed like well, I always remember because Toronto, he was just such a peaceful man who didn't want to hurt anybody. He just seemed very like a pacifist to the extent he wouldn't even hurt like Zeds. He preferred locking them in houses and stuff like that, which led to some pretty fucking hilarious stuff, which I'll tell you in a wee bit. But,
yeah. So I think the first time that we actually met in game that wasn't like a group thing was shortly after Yari was killed, and you were with Blackpaw at that point. Am I correct?
It was a while before, because Yari was dead for a while before I joined Blackpaw. But it was, when I say a while, it's difficult because it was so long ago, so it's difficult to remember accurately. But it was a definite few months, like at least two or 3 months, maybe even 2.
Well, in the grand scheme of things, that's not that long, because what I remember was I had told the story to Matt earlier about how after Yari was killed, Kyle was put in charge, and I left the Guardians even though I was still in the Northeast and taking care of St. Joe's and Blackpaw, and I'm pretty sure you were there. Blackpaw approached me in the middle of Trinea Polana, wanting to perform a coup against Kyle to put me in charge of the Guardians.
I would have been with them at that point, because so the whole stuff, the whole thing that happened there, which was kind of crazy, and it was bizarre for me as well. And I originally I thought I'd made a huge mistake, to be hugely honest with you. But anyway, so through hanging around with a bunch of good guys, there was obviously Sputs. Sputs was in a group called Shield. Well, Sputs' character, Sputs, we all call him Sputs because that was his original Guardian character, and he fucked around and tried to get Brotherhood and Blackpaw like involved, and he was found out by the leader of the Guardians, Yari, and essentially executed by Yari for bringing that like said banditry to the northeast, kind of thing. So
Andy.
No, on you go.
Yep, another spectacular Doug video that I think you should put a link to during this conversation if you can, Matt. I'm going to link it to you. It was the video that who made that, Andy? Do you remember?
Raven, I think.
Raven of Putin's execution. My God, that's one of my favorite Doug videos.
I think it was. I don't know. I'll have to dig for that one. After Sputs' execution, he'd made a new character, and anyway, he was with a group called Shield at this point, and they were a bit more. They were kind of good guys, but a bit more kind of on the chaotic kind of good guys kind of side of things. So, bit more shooty. I started hanging about with them, and through them, I met a guy called Felix, who was part of Blackpaw. And Blackpaw were kind of our enemies, but some of them were kind of cool with us, like OC slash, and we'd hang out in TeamSpeak. And I got kind of friendly with this guy. And the way things were going RP wise, I was told in game by Kyle about his story about before everything turning apocalyptic and that, or just after everything turning apocalyptic. He found like an M4 or something like that off a dead soldier, or he got his hands on an M4 and he decided to mag dump a car with a family in it with a child in the, and he didn't care. He just thought it was the end of the world. So fuck it, he'll just do whatever he wants. And he just guns down this. So in game, he's taken me to the top. You'll know exactly where I'm talking about. Toronto overlooking the is it? Oh, I forgot what it's called now. The valley, like that leads. I want to call it Pridorki, but
Trovo?
it's yes, Trovo. The valley, like the kind of that's leading easterly, the cliffs leading like east towards Svetlo, like overlooking Trovo. We were standing on those cliffs, and he was telling me this story about he murdered a family and children, and I'm standing there like in game, like I don't really know what to say, man. And I'm thinking, do I shoot him? Do I shoot him on the spot? How do I? So I was thinking about it and thinking about it, and I was like, we'll we'll put that on the back burner for later. And Kyle actually wrote a fantastic story about it as well, but I don't think many people had paid attention to the story. And
Yeah.
back then, stories could be taken in character if it was done tastefully. If you talk to the person who will see about it, it was very different back then. Kyle just opened up to me, and he opened up to Dixie about it as well, and to Tex, the leader of the Firekeepers. And of course, they forgave him for his previous sins, what with them being good friends. But
I
I
didn't.
kept it kind of, oh, well, I just kind of kept it I just kept it to myself kind of thing. And then just a sheer just act of complete randomness. And I did have a little bit of a fancy for Blackpaw, and had since I joined. I randomly asked Felix one day out of character if I could join Blackpaw, and he was like, "Sure." And I started being a little spy for Blackpaw, and that's when the whole Alsha Hill incident, and
Yeah.
when that whole scenario happened, and that was when I essentially defected. But the reasoning behind the defection was that I wasn't so much like Toronto. Kyle had just been made the leader of the Guardians, and I didn't think that was right, considering this. He's murdered an innocent family and an innocent child. You know what I mean? It's like you want this guy as the head. And it seemed a bit hypocritical for the brackets good guys to be forgiving this murderer. So when I defected, I made sure that all of Blackpaw knew all this dirty secret, and they came out with it all across the airwaves and all across the radio. That the leader of the Guardians, the so-called peaceful Guardians, was a child murderer. And all this. That would have been around about the time when the kind of scheme was hatched within Blackpaw. Like, we should try and get Toronto as the leader. He should be the rightful leader anyway. He's better than all of them.
Yeah, and you were gonna play me like a puppet. I know.
Well,
I was gonna be Blackpaw's little puppet.
well, that's just how the game is
Yeah,
played.
I know. I know. I know.
Oh man. But saying that we chatted a little while ago, and there was, I can't remember if I told you, but do you remember the Green Mountain Nomads?
Yes.
They used to come terrorizing
Yes.
um, St. Joe's all the time, and they were fearsome bandits, and they were good PvPers as well. And if I recall, they got in with the cult somehow as well. So they were like the cult's little army. So, but we as Blackpaw, we got into a fight, various fights with them until they didn't want to fight us anymore. And we lived so close together. Instead, they were like, "Okay, let's not fight. let's just be like cool and not shoot each other because we don't want to get into fights anymore. So we were like, okay, that's fine. And one day I was on my way to, because I had this little game, this little kind of thing that I like to do, where I had this in character kind of addiction to weed and drugs that I couldn't get out west after joining Black Paw. So I'd had to sneak off and get it from Dixie or, a guardian that I'd know. And Tex used to hate it. Like, he used to hate this Black Paw scum sneaking in and, like, sneaking off with his wife and like disappearing. He couldn't execute me or have me executed because then all of Black Paw would come down on them and that wouldn't be fun.
Yeah.
But not just that. At the same time, I was in a lot of ways looking out for them a lot of times, and there was a lot of, as time went on, there was a lot of rescues and stuff. In fact, there was a huge rescue of Tex at that Prison Island event, but that's way down the line. But yeah, I used to have this back and forth where I'd go to St. Joe's all the time and I'd revisit the Northeast to get my brackets RP. But one day, anyway, I'm heading to St. Joe's and I'm on the radio and Green Mountain Nomads are on the fucking radio. And I'm like, hey fellas, what's up? And they're like, we're just in St. Joe's. We're just torturing people, just fucking having some fun. And I'm like, oh, well, I don't know if you knew this, boys, but St. Joe's is a place where a lot of good friends of mine hang out. I really would appreciate it if you, fuck off and leave them alone. And they were like, yes, sir, and just left instantly. Like, because I was on my way there. Like, I was like, no, you're not fucking murdering people at St. Joe's. You can go and fucking murder people anywhere else, not at St. Joe's. And they were like, yep, no problem.
Black Paw and Shield were good for that. They weren't good guys, but they also weren't really bad guys. The seriousness of the RP is what I loved about Toronto, but I also kind of love the fact that I'm away from it now. That last and even before that, like Yaris Death, the attempted coup on Kyle by Black Paw, the all the interactions with the cult and being hunted by Dam for finding out that it was them that was responsible for the fish fry bombing. The RP, it got to me, man. Like it.
Yeah, it does.
Because Toronto was like an extension of myself. Like Toronto was me in game reacting to the things that happened to him in game. And you were talking about the whole Kyle thing. Like I didn't mention it to Matt out loud, but yeah, it was he had that same conversation with me about gunning down a family. And
Yeah.
and Toronto,
And you're just like, what?
yeah, like Toronto's whole thing was like, I'm living right now because my wife and kid who because he's an extension of me, like it's my wife and kid.
I know exactly what you mean, dude.
All that really got to me. So kind of getting back to like Dill's question here, and from what I can see, Doc's next question here. I loved playing Toronto because he was so well known and beloved throughout the Doug community, but it was tough. Like dealing with that, and like I get it, it's just a game. I like here I am like a 50-year-old guy getting kind of emotional about a character that I played in a game, but it was me, and all that stuff that happened to him really, like it kept me up at night, like wondering how am I gonna deal with this? Kyle
It's
just told me
amazing.
that he gunned down a family as you know somebody who is supposed to look up to this guy. I can't do it. I need to leave the Guardians, but I still owe Yari for getting him killed. So I'm going to leave the Guardians, but I'm also going to try to keep taking care of St. Joe's. Like
Yeah, yeah.
it, I and so to
And
go
then
on
your
to
house disappears as well.
Yeah. Oh yes. Oh yes. That pissed me off. So there was a map change. All the Guardians had houses, and Toronto's house was where the train station in Novo, between Novo and Trinea was. So when the map change happened, it was during this whole time that Kyle and I were very strained. So Kyle's in charge of the Northeast, and all of a sudden my house disappeared, and there was a train station there. I was pissed about that.
Just literally deleted.
That's so funny. Jesus.
We like
Blame Kyle
squadding
for it?
Yeah, of course I blame Kyle for it. Imagine if it was Waldorf, though.
Oh, it would
But
have been
that's
bullshit.
we just came through one day and we just see Toronto and he's just like really sad and we're like, "What's up, man?" And he's like,
My
"My
house
house
is
is
gone.
gone." And I was like, "Shit, so it has." Like, that's
Guy,
He's like, "I don't know."
my goddamn house away.
That's so funny.
I was so sad. But back to what you're saying about an extension of yourself and your own character. That's everybody. Like I'm sorry, but no matter what character you play, no matter how like psychotic or or how, they're always some kind of extension, especially like your first character. Because it was the
Yeah.
same with me with John. Like I was
Yeah.
totally emotional when I was assassinated. Like
Yeah.
a massive part of me didn't want to do it, but at the same time, it's like it has to go down this way because it makes it. It was so like good. Like thinking back on the way Andy did it and having her sob her eyes out to me, telling me she loved me before she pulled the trigger. You know what I mean? It's 10 out of 10 RP. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You can't recreate that experience. You know what I mean? And after it happened, and you're trying to play again, and you're trying to think about another character, and you can't even. You go through it's like a little part of yourself died. It's
Yeah.
bizarre.
Yeah.
It's just like how you say, you get really emotional and it's confusing because you're like, it's just a computer game. Like, what the hell? And it's you over time you realize that extension of yourself. It's like, well, it's like a little part of you, your little secondary life. You know, your life extension in this fantasy world has gone because those morals that you carry with yourself, like every day, will extend on to this game through it did like how it did with you through Toronto, how it even did with me with John, because it was the same with me. John was essentially just how I think I would react in that environment,
Right.
you know.
Yeah, I feel like that's the same thing with my Matt character. Is it's me. Like my name is Matt. Is
Yeah. And and
that's me. Like I'm
and,
just
and
playing
I
a
can
guy.
I can see that happening to you, and I'm actually kind of surprised that you walked away from Matt. I hope
For
it's
the
only
time being. For
temporary.
the time
Yeah.
being. Yeah. I
I
needed a
hope it's
break.
only temporary. Yeah, and that's understandable.
Because like you guys said, it's emotionally investing, and I was like,
Yeah.
I didn't feel like I was getting what I was putting into it. So I was like, I'm gonna take a step back and maybe take them in a different direction. But
Yeah, and like, don't get me wrong. I I love your caveman character.
yeah,
I hate that guy, but and I finally met your cop
yeah,
character
last night that was good.
who I also don't like.
You're
So
good. You almost got shot so many fucking times last night.
I don't think I've met Waldorf. I've still
no,
met
you
your.
haven't.
I don't think so. I think I maybe met you once on a throwaway character I was using.
Oh Jesus
Maybe.
Christ! I
Oh
think I
my
even
god.
recognize that voice.
You may have, my friend,
And
but I like to. That was one thing with Toronto because I knew your patterns very well with rolling around St. Joe's. I don't know if you will have told the story, the various stories of. I think it was like maybe
Doom, Doom guy
three
and
or four.
Krusty.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Doom Guy and Busty.
back to back days. Andy threw out one. I think it was all. I think it was back to back days.
One off
Yeah,
characters.
One off characters that were both just mind blowingly good. Like bravo.
well, Yeah, the first one, like, well, I can't, because this, I'm sure, I can't even remember in what order, but the Krusty the Clown one was, but you can explain if you haven't your experience with Krusty, because there's more to it than you just the experience
Well,
that you had.
well, Krusty was just a sad clown who wouldn't take off his mask, but it was just it was tense because it's a clown and nobody likes clowns in the apocalypse.
Well, I did. I purposefully dressed up to look as fucking psychotic as
Yeah,
possible, and I put on a Gilligan hat, so that I looked like a Gilligan as well.
and the Doom guy was just hilarious. Like, and I can't even describe what you did there because
What did I do? So Doom Guy, so in Trinea Polana, for some reason, guns would just spawn everywhere. Like civilian gun, like shotguns, fucking magnums, repeaters. They just hyper spawned in Trinea Polana. So it was a really good spot to get re-geared really quickly because you could just get guns. So I thought to myself, I'll load myself up with weapons and I'll just roll around shooting zombies and I'll see if because you used to be able to type chat in game. I don't know if you still can do that, but so I'd wander over. I'd say, right, I'll pretend I'm like a robot or something, like, and I'll run up to people and I'll say, "Do you want me to kill the demons? Y/N question mark." And if they press Y, I would then play through my speakers, through my headset, the Doom music, and I'd just roll around shooting all the Zeds inside. And they could follow me and shoot them as well. Or
so yeah, Yari and I think it was only Yari and I that were around
it was, yeah,
that
yeah.
night. And Yari and I just used Doom Guy to clear out the entire northeast of infected. It was
Nice.
hilarious.
Yeah, pretty much. And then, so the next day, yeah, I came as Krusty the Clown, and I intentionally dressed up as the most psychotic looking like person you could see at that time. And at the same time, I put on a kind of sketchy, kind of Joker voice from The Dark Knight, kind of like this, and was talking kind of just to put them off so they wouldn't know who I was.
It's pretty good.
Yes. So
Yeah.
I started speaking in that kind of weird way because I already knew Toronto. They'd all know my voice if I, spoke. So I had to put on this kind of weird accent. So I'm talking like that, and people are rolling around, and they're like, "Yo, you can't. What are you doing here?" kind of thing. And I'm like, "Oh, I'm just hanging out. I'm just making some food here." What are you doing dressed up like that and holding me up, and I'm putting my hands up, being like, "Please don't rob me," and things. So people are disarming me and telling me that I shouldn't wear that stuff around here. And even Toronto, who'd bumped into me,
Oh,
had
he
been
was he
like,
was just so sad,
"Yeah."
but creepy.
Yeah. But he's just like, I came up with some story that I'd been robbed blind by
Yeah.
some guns and like military gear, and that when I was little, clowns used to cheer me up, so I dressed like a clown, and my face was disfigured by these military guys who like beat me up and broke my face open and shit. And it's so sad. So Toronto's like, "You probably shouldn't wear the mask. You try and put this mask on," and like left me like a bandana thing. And they kind of like left, and I just put the clown mask back on. But so initially, when you guys went away, the first thing you would have done, Toronto, is you would have locked all the zombies up in the fire station, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
You had to have done because there was about 20 of them in there, right? So I don't know if you remember the guy Maddie Adder. You remember
Yes.
him?
Oh, yes.
So he after you guys left, he randomly spawned nearby as a fresh spawn, and he came running in and started like kind of being his freaky self and being freaky around me, and I was being freaky back to him. And he said something along the lines, "Do you want to have a party? Do you want to get a chainsaw and have a party?" And I was like, "Yeah, sure." So he ran off. And he lured all the zombies out of the shed and then ran them down to me when I was sitting in the sitting animation next to St. Joe's. So I had loads of zombies to deal with, but I picked up the chainsaw and like chainsawed them all down. Then Maddie just disappeared after this crazy interaction. And then some girl called Lemon or Lemons from the
Oh,
Brotherhood.
Lemon. Yeah, I remember her.
Yeah. She came over the radio and was like, "Hey, this is the Brotherhood. We're doing like I can't remember. They were doing just meet and greet, essentially, like handing out provisions.
Yeah,
And
she called it her lemonade run.
yeah, lemonade
Yeah.
run. Yeah, that was what it was. And she said, if we'll be at the Svetlajar's church. If you're in need of supplies. So I put my chainsaw, picked up my chainsaw, went running in, and I actually had fuel in it as well. I came running into Svetlajar, dressed like a complete psycho clown with a chainsaw, running. Went there, met the Brotherhood people. They were actually really nice and friendly in that. Then you guys reappeared with Yari and at the church, if you recall. And Yari was just not having it. He was like, "No, I'm sick of this fucking creepy guy. Eh? I'm not having you here." What did he take my chainsaw away? I'm pretty sure he confiscated my chainsaw and then locked me in, or they shut me in the church and all left me. And I was kind of upset. So I shot myself in the head. That was the
Jesus
end.
Christ.
No, nobody would accept me. I was just a happy clown with a chainsaw. And
Yeah.
Yari wouldn't have it. He was like, "No, I'm not having you. You're taking the piss at this point." He's like,
I've done a couple of like one-off characters since then, and I want to someday have as much of an impact as you did on somebody as you did on me with those two characters, because they were mind-blowingly good.
well, alt characters are just for experimenting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Having an alt character is just so much fun.
Oh yeah.
It's always most of the fun actually I've had. The most incredible interactions I have usually are on my main, but then the most it's hard to say because then some of the craziest interactions I have are on my alts. It's just usually just mayhem,
Yeah,
Um,
I agree with that sentiment completely. My main, I have the most intense, very mature role play experiences with people.
mhm.
Sometimes they're really fucking good. Sometimes they're really bad, but sometimes they're really fucking good. My alt, which was the caveman character, was just my like, let's fuck around with people.
Yeah, and I've kind of done that as Waldorf. Like Waldorf started as an alt. I didn't think this was going to stay for 2.5 years, and it's been now. But like, and going back to what I was talking about before, like the difference in the stress level that I feel about RP between Waldorf and Toronto is like night and day. I have absolutely no stress. Waldorf gets shot, it bounces off his steel plate in his head, and he wakes up on the beach. It doesn't matter. I think that kind of answers Doc's next question.
So the next one is from Oz, and it's from your perspective, have you felt a difference in your Doug experience from when you first joined until now?
The first time I actually got into any kind of stressful situation with this character was against Oz because he had me at gunpoint.
Yeah, you told me about that when you first came back,
Yeah,
and you were like, that was one of the craziest fucking
yeah, it was.
moments. Shout out
It
to
was.
Oz.
I've never been. I was shaking during most of that interaction and the subsequent fight afterwards. I've never been rescued like that, and I was ready to, perma and
Yeah. So
yeah.
save that for when I interview you. We'll go over that.
Okay, so
It's the
have I
Oz
felt a
Oz question.
difference
Yeah.
in my Doug experience from when I first joined until now? Honestly, people, at least I see people complaining a lot now about KOS and the lack of RP, and I personally don't see it. And it is kind of frustrating to me when I see people complaining about that, because I'm a solo, and it's tough being a solo.
Mm-hmm.
And I've pretty much been a solo since I left the Guardians. I was like 6, 7 years ago. As a solo, maybe I'm not as deep into the RP as I used to be, and that's a personal choice. Like I said, the RP that I was having back when Hunted by the Cult and Damn and all that was it was stressful. It really
It's
was.
exhausting.
Yeah, with Waldorf, I don't see that. I leave interactions all the time with just Waldorf's got to go to bed. I'm out of here. I don't feel that same kind of stress that I did when I felt responsible for my own story and um
Others.
for a bigger story. Exactly.
Mm.
Um, I don't know if I want get Waldorf involved in something like that. Like, I think Waldorf is fun for other people in short periods of time. He'd be
Fair,
pretty
yeah.
great. He'd be pretty great, and if you had to live next to him,
Yeah.
and deal with him every day. The Merrymen did it though. Good for them. I did drive them off eventually with my ranting, but so to stay on Oz's question here, the RP's there. It really is. I see it all the time as Waldorf. I saw it maybe too much as Toronto.
Do you think that's because of the type of character you're playing? Do you think if you were still playing like a Toronto type character, it might be a bit different?
Yeah, like I said, this is from my view as a solo, and I said that because as some of the groups who really want that RP experience and are chasing that, I can definitely see how it might be different for them. But for me, I don't see it as a solo. There were times, back in the golden age, I guess, where it was pretty shooty. And the only thing that we had was whitelist days.
The server was back then pretty much as popular as it is now. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Where it was really there's almost a queue every day, and then on whitelist time that would get halved, and that's when all the RPers would come out because they'd feel safe, they wouldn't get KOS'd and stuff like that. And it was true back in the day, but you used to have whitelist on Friday, whitelist Saturday, and
Yeah,
I
there was
think
3 nights. Yeah.
and when you say the golden days, because I was working in the NHS, and then I used to love coming home on a Friday and being like, feet up, all dug all weekend, and I'd play for fucking hours straight.
As Waldorf, I love it being open. I love it because my favorite
The new
interactions
people.
as Waldorf is with new people. I love being able to introduce people to Doug. I loved it as Toronto, and after Yari was killed in Svetlajarsk, and I eventually shot and killed Michael in Svetlajarsk, exactly where Yari was killed. Um, I kept kind of a shrine there as Toronto, and it was just a shelter with survival stuff for freshies, and I liked being that new player's first experience where they would come across that shelter and read the notes that were left there, explaining why it was there, and take some things and take that story with them. And I do that now as Waldorf in a different way.
Well, you've
And
done it your whole time here, man, because
yeah,
it's like
I know.
I was literally I'm one of those people that when I first got on the server, that's what I mean. I used to practice my RP on you. I used to come to St. Joe's all the time to see if I could bump into Toronto to get some RP or chat. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're one of the most important people on the server for that reason, because you are a stepping stone for new people and RP, and not only that, but you maintain the area. Well, St. Joe's, which is a community camp, and community camps are another massive stepping stone.
Oh yes.
And that's what. So, as I say, I'm an example of one of those people that you have like pushed through the door, as it were, into like RP. You know what I mean? And you continue to do it, and that's why you're such a diamond. That's
And
why
that
that's why I love you, man.
and that flatters the hell out of me because like I don't consider myself, or at least I didn't, as Toronto, I didn't consider myself an RPer. And Matt and I talked about this before you joined. Before I played on Doug, I didn't RP. I didn't grow up with it. I tried to get some of my friends when I was a kid interested in Dungeons and Dragons, and none of them wanted to play. So it's something that always interested me, but I never did any, role playing. Toronto was me. I am Toronto in game, and I didn't even consider that to be role playing until like people like you pointed it out to me. Like you're role playing right now. Like that's what you're doing, and like Waldorf is a character, but Toronto wasn't, and I did that for like 6 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This episode of Doug Deep Dive is brought to you by the DayZ Underground server. Please visit DayZUnderground.com to learn more and join our Discord community for more information. So you are technically the reason I exist on Doug, because if I don't have that interaction with Justin at Giglovo, then I probably don't play on Doug.
Well,
Justin came from you. Like
the amazing thing about Justin's series, which I'm going to go back
I
right
fucking
now.
love it. Yeah, it's so
Justin, I fucking love you. The amazing thing about Justin's series is I didn't even realize until I watched it again a couple of months ago. The very first scene in his series is him coming across that shrine that I left in Svetlojarsk for Yari.
That's the best part about Doug is like you had no idea that was going to happen.
No,
like you didn't know that was going to set off his character into a completely different storyline, and then be intertwined with Toronto for the rest of his time.
And then he was there documenting it from a periphery, the entire downfall of Toronto.
Yeah, it's like a third person view of your fucking spiral.
And I am forever, once again, I said this earlier, I'm going to say it again. I am forever grateful for that.
We'll move on to the next one. What got you into Doug, and what inspired your first character from Riker? So you kind of touched on it.
Yeah. So
just a summary.
Riker. I've already talked about this a lot. Toronto was me. Like that is how I would imagine I would react in the situation that I was put in, and almost every decision that I made as Toronto came from me, the person, not really Toronto, the character. Waldorf is a completely different story. From playing Toronto for as long as I did, I grew into being a role player. I think that's what's allowed me to play Waldorf the way that I have, is because I started to get it.
Takes time.
It does. It does. If it's not something that you're used to, that's why I love the role players, the real role players that we do, not the real ones, but the ones that know what they're doing and come into Doug wanting to further a story. I appreciate those guys so much, because they're the ones who really derive things until everybody else catches up, like I did as Toronto, and took that into Waldorf. I love being a character.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun.
It is a lot of fun.
Adam says, what do you think about the current state of Doug, and what do you think could help it going into the future?
Again, we kind of talked about this a little bit earlier. I think it's in a good spot. I really do. I think that opening up to everybody all the time and not having whitelist days was a fantastic idea when it was done. The RP is still there if that's what you're looking for. And if it's not what you're looking for, great. You can find whatever the hell else you're looking for too. As much as we complain about KOS and everything, it's necessary, and it's always been there. It's not something that's going to change because we complain about it. And honestly, and Andy will probably back me up on this, KOS, it was around during whitelist days, probably worse.
It's hard to say.
Maybe not worse, but it hurt. It hurt more when it happened.
Put it this way: I used to log in on whitelist time on my alt and shoot people.
Okay, all right.
As the creature, as a baghead, as whatever.
Yeah.
Whitelist time was time for people that thought they were safe with whitelist to get shot.
Exactly.
Yeah, but that's what made it so good. I do agree. I like that Doug is open. I wouldn't be totally opposed to, like, in the future, maybe if the pop stays up, throwing one in there like half a day or something.
I wouldn't disagree with that either.
Yeah, just to see how it goes, but I do like that I never know what the fuck I'm gonna get when I log in.
I'm of the very, very unpopular opinion, but I'm a huge fan of whitelist, and it's just because I don't have time for like cheaters or bullshit like that, and it's just I feel that the whitelist eliminates a lot of that kind of nonsense out of it. But I do agree with you that having the server open allows for much more of a growth of the community, a lot more people to come in and kind of test the water, and a lot more ground for the community to grow. Because with new people, you get new ideas, new imaginations, right?
Characters.
new characters,
And that,
new stories, new groups. So it's a good
and
thing.
that's kind of the what I'm getting at. Like, if the role play is there, people will find it, and leaving it open and having all these new people come in and establish themselves, even if they're not there for the RP, if it's there, maybe it'll turn some of them. Like,
Yeah.
this is, I think, as close as you're going to find in a video game to putting yourself into a situation like this, an apocalypse, the zombie apocalypse, But I found this, and this is probably answering a earlier or a later question, but I found this because I had Arma. I was watching The Walking Dead. I was like, is there anything out there that in a video game that
Recreates it.
even closely replicates this? And I started Googling, and I found the DayZ mod for Arma. And
Yeah.
I'm like, holy shit, I have Arma. I barely played it at the time, but let's try this. And yeah, I've been, oh God, 8,000 hours on DayZ
Jesus
standalone.
Christ.
And
I never even touched. I've never touched the mod.
it is garbage. Like,
It was so bad.
looking back on it now, it is absolute garbage.
At the time, it was
But
innovative. It was something that had never been done before.
But what was innovative about it is not. I'm talking about the mechanics of the game are garbage. But what was innovative about it was the interactions, and that's why I think Doug is a step above. It's the interactions that as long as there are role players on Doug willing to
Risk it.
yeah, and if we go too far the other way, it's dangerous, and we've been there before. I think,
Yeah.
where we lost a lot of hardcore role players, but people have stepped up and found their RP game, and I think we're in a good spot. I really do.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. This is from Benjamin, Captain Biscuits.
Yep.
You always seem to play solo. What attracts you so much to that play style, and what are the hardest challenges about it?
Goddamn, I hate other people.
That's fair. People cause drama, man.
Goddamn people. I
Hate them.
They're goddamn pogging and dabbing and capping and everything. I don't really think that there's a single thing that attracts me to it outside of not having to deal with other people's bullshit. And I'm not saying that there was any bullshit in the Guardians or the Saviors or any of the other groups that I've been, allied with, or it's, I want to play it my way. And even when I was with the Guardians, I didn't talk to them on TeamSpeak. I kept everything in game because it's just the way that I want to play the game.
Do the same thing with the Overlook. I usually am
Were
in
you?
comms. Yeah.
Good for you.
I'm usually always. Yeah. There's been a few times where I've been in comms, like due to like me logging into like shooting or something, and just to, like make sure we're not killing each other. But other than that, I hop out. I'm like, hey guys, I'm gonna hop in game, so I'm hopping out.
When I get into a video game, and as I was saying earlier, most of the video games that I play are single player experiences. But when I get into a video game, I don't want to talk to people. Like, I don't want to talk to
play. Yeah.
Exactly. If I run into somebody in game, I talk to that person, obviously, but it's my escape from the world.
You play the game like you're reading a book.
Yeah.
No, that's exactly.
Trying to get immersed.
That is it. Like, I grew up on choose your own adventure books. I love those things.
Fantastic.
Yeah, and that's what this is to me. I don't want somebody in my ear telling me, what I should be doing,
or who's coming up over the hill or whatever.
Exactly. I want to experience it all as it's presented to me, and that's what I love about playing as a solo.
Not enough people actually do that. Like, a lot of people are in their Discord with their groups, getting the information and like using that. Like, obviously, like it's technically OC, but if you have a radio, you could say that you would have. You know what I mean? People like do that loophole bullshit. I think a lot of people would enjoy the game more if they just were out of comms with their groups, even or as a solo, like just in general. But with their groups, I think if they just got out of comms and just enjoyed the game, I think a lot of people would probably have a lot better time.
I
totally agree.
I think they would have a lot better time playing the game. I do not, hold it against anybody that wants to be in comms talking to their friends because I've made friends playing this game. We've all made friends playing this game, and so sometimes you want to talk to them, and I get it. But for me, I want to I want to be immersed in the world that DayZ and Doug presents to me.
Talk of the Merry Men, your favorite person.
Yeah. I noticed it says formally.
Yeah. I think he's gone now. I think he permaed.
Okay.
So
yeah, I learned that in game last night.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's why it was Doc of the Merry Men, and then I changed it to formerly.
Yeah.
Because I'm Matt, formerly of the Overlook. So.
But you're not dead.
I'm not dead yet, though. Yeah.
Not yet.
There's still time. Waldorf can still do it.
Waldorf doesn't want to kill you. He just wants you to be left alone by you. Not
lied to about cows.
Yeah, exactly. And for you to admit that your eye was never missing.
My eye was missing. Well, we'll figure it out.
That's bullshit.
What was the most intergroup drama that you dealt with as a group when playing Toronto? So probably in your Guardian days.
So yeah, I assume this means
Kyle stuff.
IRL or in game.
I would think it would be like intergroup drama. I don't know. IRL? Did you have any IRL drama?
No, I don't think there was. I don't think there was any real life drama. In game, it was the whole Kyle being the leader of the Guardians after what we learned about him. And
that is such a cool story because it's something that was his background. It wasn't even what happened in game. It was something that he made up to make his character more interesting.
Yeah.
And then he became this leader of a good guy group, and then admitted to people that he did some shady shit in his past. You know who also did that? Who's a fantastic role player? I'll shout him out right now. Is Bo, of Odyssey.
I didn't know about his shady past.
He on Vadim's stream one time, he told him his background. I won't spoil it. It is one of the most fucked up things I've ever heard somebody say, but it made sense for his character. And I was I was literally watching it in my bed, live on stream. Vadim was playing, and Vadim stopped being in character for it because he was like, "What the fuck?" But it was just it was something like horrific that played into the story so well with the Golden Peppers and Vadim. Story
Bo was
but he did it so well. He presented it so well, and I was like, "Fuck, that was good." I was like, "That's better than fucking primetime TV." It was so good, but yeah,
and that's the joy of DayZ Underground is when you get that look inside of somebody's character, and with Kyle, when it was probably a few months before, and it was when Yari was still in charge of the Guardians, when Kyle told me that story, and I hated him in game because I got a wife and kid back in Canada, and I just want to get back to them, and you're gunning down a car
families.
And I hated him in game, and when he was killed and he was put in charge, which by the way I actually voted for in character. Just because I wanted him there to be mad at him.
Yeah. I need an antagonist.
Yeah. And so it's funny because that was there were two times where I abandoned St. Joe's, and one was when Kyle was in charge, and I went and lived up in the hills, the cliffs above St. Joe's, looking down on it, watching over it and stuff. And then when right after the fish fry bombing, I left a note there, and I would go down and put stuff in it, and the note said, just take what you need and get the fuck out.
Mm-hmm.
And I went and lived in the cliffs, and at one point Harvey, who was leader of Darkest Midnight, made a comment about me being like Batman, like living up in the hills and watching over, the city and stuff. And I loved that comment. I don't remember exactly what it was, but it was like,
oh, you're like Batman.
Yeah, so
that was my best Harvey impersonation.
Yeah. Yeah. So, getting back to Doc's question here, the whole Kyle thing with the Guardians was it played out so well. And when Kyle was finally leaving, Jesus Christ, the story sounds ridiculous, but it all made sense in character. Dixie was pregnant with twins or something, and Kyle was escorting her out of the country into the north somewhere, and I had given Tony, I think, from the Guardians, a single bullet for Kyle because he still didn't deserve to live, and Tony told me that he wasn't going to give it to him. So I was actually hunting them as they were on their way out, and they were on the radio the whole time. And I was going to shoot Kyle before he could get away, just because I didn't think that he should.
Did you know that I was there? I was there with the truck as they were leaving, and
I did not know that.
I've got a screenshot somewhere of me.
You did show me that. Yes.
Ready to pull the trigger, but they wouldn't let me do. Shadow was like, "You're not going to do it," and I was let me. And she was like, "No, you're not going to do it because they'll go mental. You're ruining their." And I'm like, "No, he deserves it."
Exactly.
But
sometimes people deserve the bullet, man.
Exactly.
I didn't want to say this, but he's still out there. He could come back.
He technically never came back.
I'd also like to add, right, just because it's Kyle. He's like our old pal. I'd noticed he's been playing DayZ again, and I was wondering, like, I wonder if he's playing on Doug. I wonder if he'll come back as Kyle.
He was back about, I want to say, like 6 or 8 months ago, and he went around. A few groups ran into him, and he sat down and did songs for him, which is awesome.
That's cool.
Oh, that's so awesome. Yep. Yeah, that is
because he has a couple of tapes in the game.
Yep.
You know
I
what I'm
know.
talking about. Yeah.
The other thing I was going to add with the whole because nobody knew, because Dixie, obviously, so Dixie's character, she was a brackets, how shall we put this, she liked to sleep around, as Andy once put when they were having an argument, an in character argument.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we can't all be like you, Dixie, for we can't all fuck ourselves through the apocalypse or fuck our ways through the apocalypse.
People deal with things differently,
Well, that's just what her character. She was an alcoholic, and he was a bit of a whore, shall we say?
Yeah.
But anyway, at the time, we had a kind of little romantic fling going on in character, but at the same time, she had one going on with Kyle, and obviously, she was with Tex. So there was this kind of, like, when she became pregnant, there was talk among the different groups, like, whose child is it? Is it John's child? Is it Tex's child? And is it such and such? And I'm like.
Yeah, the lineage of those twins is really up in the air.
Yeah. I've thought of that, honestly. I've thought
maybe in another 5 or 6 years we'll see him fucking running around.
By your 20th anniversary video, it's going to be hosted by him.
Yeah. All right, we'll move on to the next one with another BP question. What are your 3 top tips for becoming better at RP?
Oh man, this is a tough one because I saw this earlier. I have a real hard time giving people tips about role play because, like I said, my first character was me. Tip number 1, react as you would as your character. Don't overthink it. For the most part, I think most of us, either ourselves or an extension of ourselves, like how we would be if I was a 78-year-old man whose roommate in the retirement home was Barry Manilow, or if I was, who I was as Toronto, which was, a 45-year-old man with a wife and kid that I wanted to get back to, and I hope they were still alive. Just be as realistic about your responses to situations and people as you can. That's my number one tip. Really, the only tip that I think matters. Try to be as realistic as possible. Your character might not even be realistic, but stick with your character. That's it. Like Andy, you got anything?
It's really hard. Really, it's a tough question. Even like a top 3 tips on how to improve your RP. I've always been an advocate of the organic kind of play style and just go with the flow. Like the RP will manifest in itself. Stories will manifest through
Yeah.
your own journey. You know, I mean, you'll come across people you like, you'll come across people you don't like. You know, if you just go with the flow, the story almost kind of writes itself, and your character will flow into that. Often a lot of the times as well, people will shy away from things that make them feel uncomfortable or situations that they don't want to be in because maybe they might get perma'd or they might get captured. And it's like, no, throw yourself into the most uncomfortable situations you can always.
Yeah. I still have a problem with that one. Like I still don't like uncomfortable situations as even as Waldorf, who doesn't give a shit about anything. I still have a problem with that one a little bit.
I mean, I thought this is what I mean. I've had problems with it in the past where I've essentially had a gun to my head and it's like, you're going to die unless you talk your way out of this. And I've managed to do it several times. And it's after the first couple of times you're like, okay, I'm doing that every time. You know what I mean? Because there adds so much height to it when, you know, you're sitting there, you know, in front of your computer shaking with a gun to your face, being like, okay, like, you know, it adds this massive whole new depth to things, to the point where, you know, when it finally does happen, it's you know, it's heartbreaking. You're like, damn it, almost lived. But it just, yeah, and it can be scary. Like, you know, it can be really scary, because you've got a gun to your head, kind of thing.
Yeah. I'm gonna add one. I've got another
rule
tip.
number 2.
Okay. This isn't a rule. This is a general guideline. Most of the role players on Doug are really good at this. When your story's over, let it go. Just move on to the next one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like know when your story is best to end for the bigger picture.
Yep.
Yes.
And like I said, like it's, I think most, if not like 99% of the people on DayZ now or on Doug now know it. But there have been times in the past, and I've been around a long time. I've seen lots of them where somebody should have permed and didn't.
Yeah.
I could think of one, but I don't want to.
Exactly. And it's your character.
Yeah,
and
exactly.
and it is very personal to people. You got to advance the bigger picture, and the bigger picture is the hundreds of other stories that are happening at the same time as yours. And if it advances the entire server story, don't let it go.
Yeah, I think Toronto is a great example of that. Your death probably in the moment probably didn't feel like it was going to be as important as it was.
It blew me away how important it was, like, even months after. Like I didn't expect that. You know, I didn't expect that there'd still be a shrine at St. Joe's for Toronto, and for people to be asking whoever's there, you know, what is this about? And that's all in game. That's something that Ray, I call him Love Ray, that Love Ray did for Toronto for the last 2.5 years. And it blew me away how important that character ended up being in, looking back on it. It makes me kind of emotional just thinking about it.
Well, that's what I mean, dude. You're even so modest about it. It's like,
Yeah, you
it's
are
actually,
Toronto. Like
Well,
100%.
like
it was
that line is there because you have
You
helped
put in the
so
effort.
many of us
yeah, but
get to this level.
it was also, it was a perfect storm, and that's the the wonderful thing about this server is sometimes like a secondary or tertiary character, for reasons unbeknownst to everybody else, will get pushed to the forefront and become somebody who is important to drive home the story of the entire server. And if it wasn't for Darkest Midnight blowing up the fish fry, that never would have happened. If it wasn't for those like 5 random coincidences where I happened to be at the same point at the same place as the Cult of Papa in like a 2-month time, it never would have happened. And all those things happened to just like swell this story up to the point where I had nowhere to go as Toronto. It was just hopeless, and people were trying to like save me. Like the goddamn Rangers were going to take me in, for God's sakes.
I'm so glad that didn't happen.
Like the Rangers were like, no, you need to stay here. You cannot go back there. And I'm like, Sam, I love Sam. Sam was like, no, you can't go. You need to stay here. And I took the next opportunity. I'm like, no, St. Joe's is my place. I have to go back there. And then 2 days later, I was back there, and Darkest Midnight caught me, and that was the end of that. If that story is taking you to a place where you think that you can take a story that's going to drive home the lore, then keep going, keep going with it. Like I didn't have to, as Toronto, I didn't have to start ranting about the cult being in my head and you know trying to turn me to the point where a lot of the server was thinking that I was, in fact, part of the Cult of Papa, which was brilliant. And like on their part, it was brilliant to put that idea in my head.
Yeah.
And I know you've seen it too. Yeah.
I kind of OC have always thought you've been part of Cult Papa. I know I'm being genuinely serious. I always suspected you and Yari specifically.
Oh, geez.
There's so many people
two-
that think I'm part of the, like, I've had friends that I've known for years be like, Matt, can you just tell me? I'm like, what the fuck? I'm like, no.
Hey, Matt. Hey,
No,
Papa.
no.
Push the story onward, even if it's not your story. That's my tip right there.
I think that's perfect.
Yeah, even if it's not your story, push it onward.
Yeah, move it forward. Don't let it die.
All right, this is the tough one right here.
Yeah.
This I hate this question so much.
Love Rusty. Hate the question.
But I got it.
You figured it out? All right.
I'm going to talk about it, and it's going to surprise a lot of people. So during the time that
Can we say the question first, just so we have it?
Yeah.
So Rusty says, I know that you had many memorable experiences while playing Toronto. Can you pick one that always seems to stick out in your mind when you think of that character?
Like Rusty said, there's a lot of memorable experiences I had. A lot of people are going to think that I'm going to go with a cult story or a Darkest Midnight story, or even the time that I almost turned Toronto into a server pariah by capturing Andy because she killed John Stalbert. But no, that's not it. The one that really sticks out was when Darkest Midnight was shortly after the fish fry bombing, and I'd found out that it was Darkest Midnight and Vriska. I traveled up to Dugout when Dugout was still around, and they were in the church there. And I hadn't been there for a long time, and I didn't know very many of the people there. But I ran into Moose and Mamie, and I love both those guys, and I wish they were still around. So I ran into Moose and Mamie, who I don't think I had ever met in character before. They had a big courtyard in the back of the church, and we were talking back there. And there was a shootout, and I don't know what the shootout was about. I had told them the whole story about the fish fry and the cult, and I'm tortured, and I want to get revenge on Dam and Vriska. So there was a shootout outside, and a couple of members of the dugout went out to take care of it. And when they came back, they had Vriska with them as an ally. When I walked into the church and I heard that Vriska was there in the middle of dugout with about 6 or 7 other people there, I pulled out. I think I was carrying an FX45. I pulled it out and I started going off about how I was going to kill him right there in the middle of dugout. And Mamie and Moose got in between the two of us and stood in between the two of us, telling me, "You're not doing that here. We wouldn't do that at St. Joe's. You don't do that here." It was so fucking real. Like when they said that, like it was like I like came back down to earth, and I was like, you're right. I'm not doing that here. One of them, or one of the other members of the dugout, took Vriska out, and I apologized to Mamie and Moose for doing that at dugout, and I eventually just left and went off somewhere to go to sleep, not knowing that Vriska actually sent me a message after saying that they tracked me after, and they were going to capture me and take me back to Dam and probably end my story 3 or 4 months earlier than it actually did. It was just one of those like perfect RP moments where I think if it even would have ever gotten to that point, I just would have gunned him down. But the fact that Moose and Mamie, got in between me and Vriska while I was like chasing him around dugout, and true enough, like if I would have tried to shoot him, I probably would have missed.
But in the moment,
That,
you were like, I'm going to fucking kill this guy.
yeah. The trust that I had in Vriska and in those guys not to just gun me down. Like, you're not supposed to have your gun out inside a dugout.
Oh, yeah.
And you're definitely not supposed to be chasing one of their allies around, telling them you're gonna fucking kill them.
I've seen people get dropped immediately when they pull their gun out of dugout before.
So like the trust in the story that Moose, Mamie, the rest of dugout, and Vriska had at that point, just it blows me away. And I still, like I said, I don't really consider myself much of a role player. So that was kind of a moment that it clicked for me, even though that was probably 3 or 4 years into my Doug life. That was really the moment that it clicked for me that you can do stuff like this on Doug, push the story forward without having to kill somebody. Shortly after that, Dam all showed up at St. Joe's. I was taking pot shots at them from over the on the radio, saying, "I'm gonna kill you guys if you don't leave here." And I was taking pot shots at them. I'm shooting at people here. Trying to kill people. I missed every shot, but trying to kill people who were like invading my home. That's the trust that you need to have to like drive home a story. And like I said, it all started with that moment at dugout with like everybody who was involved, trusting everybody else not to like actually pull a trigger and kill somebody. So that is my most memorable experience.
That's awesome.
Thank you, Vriska. Thank you, Dugout.
Thanks, Dugout. Next one, I think I know the answer to this one, but would you recommend Doug to others and why? From a DC Isami?
After everything that I've already said, definitely. And I would recommend it not just to people who want role play, but people who want to just immerse themselves into a world. You don't need to role play. You really don't. You just need to be able to immerse yourself in the world that DayZ Underground has created. I would recommend DayZ Underground to brand new players, because on Underground you are going to find somebody who's going to help you. You might have to look
eventually. You'll find some.
But you will find people who are going to help you, because that's why they're there. That's what their role play is. That's who their character is. It's not gonna hand you anything. And you may have to go looking, but they're there. So that's my answer to that.
We'll move on to Mittens. I put 2 down because he asked his original one was the cannibal one.
I didn't see the second one.
Yeah, so the cannibal one was his original, and then he deleted it because he thought it was a trolley question. But I was like, no, I ran with Waldorf as a cannibal once, and so I'll have you answer the second one first, if you will. If you were a cannibal and had to choose one person to eat, who would it be and why?
Jesus Christ! I haven't
On
seen
either
this one,
character, I guess.
so I haven't. Well, on Toronto, it probably would have been Vriska, like just as
That's fair.
the ultimate revenge. Maybe Harvey, because he was also involved in the fish fry bombing. I think Buck was the other one. So one of those three. Waldorf. Waldorf ate a lot of things in the POW camp back in Nam.
Oh no.
He has hinted at the fact that quite possibly he ate some giggly meat, just to stay alive back there. But he doesn't really have any enemies. He doesn't have any friends either. I don't know if Waldorf could do it. Well, I'm sure he could do it, but
Yeah.
I don't know who I would choose. Like if he was starving, he would eat anybody because he's already done.
I feel like every week it would change because like 1 week you hate Lewis, the next week you hate FL, the next week it's the Caveman. I think he'd probably maybe a Caveman.
I would probably choose Caveman. Yeah, they pissed me off on many, many occasions.
Then we'll go back and answer his first one now. If you could change one thing about Doug, what would you change and why?
I think that Doug is way too anal, and this is just me talking as somebody who does not come from a role playing environment. I think that Doug is way too anal about their find out in game and meta. And again, this is just me. I enjoy talking to people about things that have happened. I know that probably the majority of people who are here for the role play hate the meta, and I think that we as a community need to be much more open about things that have happened, like especially good experiences that have happened. And it seems to me like especially new players when they go on Discord, they get a lot of pushback if they ask about a situation or if they want to talk about something that happened in game. Again, me personally, I love talking about that stuff. I just wish that we as a community were a little bit more open about talking about things that a lot of people think we should only talk about in game. Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah, I think you have a pretty solid point.
I will say though, we're getting better. Yeah, and I do think the mods and admins have gotten a lot better at opening up that communication between people. And as you can probably tell, since we've been talking in 2 hours now, I like talking about stuff that happened here. It's fun. I want more people to have that experience.
You have a journal published in game on the Doug server. What advice would you give to people wanting to get their journal published or like a book published?
I don't consider myself much of a role player, and I don't consider myself much of a writer. The thoughts that were in my book were the first time I put I'm going to say pen to paper, since I was in high school, and as we talked about earlier, it was a long time ago. I'm very proud of the stories that I wrote. They came from Toronto. Was very close to my heart. It's who I was, and just be honest, about your character and what they would do. Like I said, put pen to paper and write about it. Toronto was kind of a perfect storm in the fact that so many different stories came together with kind of him as the thing that brought them all together. And as I was writing about that, it just got bigger and bigger and bigger. And then I just kept writing, even though my stories were pretty short. I think there was like 12 of them, all within like a 1 year period. You definitely don't have to be a good writer to get to get your your journal or your writing in game. You just have to tell a good story. If you see an opportunity to create or run with a story that's going to contribute to the overall server lore, run with it. It's so rewarding.
What would you say was the best Doug has ever been and the worst it's ever been?
That's really tough.
Yeah, these are tough. So yeah, I've been here during the 40-person queue.
Yeah, I remember. I
And,
was here too.
and I do remember, a lot of people thinking that was probably the high time on Doug, but to me, at least, it wasn't, and it wasn't the low time either. It was, I the reason why the high time was there was because there was a very popular streamer who was streaming on DayZ Underground, and it brought in a lot of people, and a lot of those people were great people, and a lot of them are still around today. So thank you. But with any big streamer comes the other side of it is
Mhm.
people just wanting to be shitters, and there was a lot of those shitters during those 40-person queues.
Yep.
So and I'm not going to say that that's a high or a low, but it's just a different way of looking at it. People see 40-person queue and like, oh, Doug is doing fantastic. From an RP point of view, it wasn't doing fantastic. And that's not to say that it wasn't there, because a lot of the new people created a group in Novo called Enclave, which really doesn't have a great reputation on DayZ Underground, I don't think. But I personally, being their neighbor, I had a great time with them. A lot of them weren't there purely for the RP, but I enjoyed having them there. They were a lot of fun. I used to have solo gunfights up at St. Joe's and watch them all come running up the hill. It was fun. Best time on Doug, for me at least, was during that. Oh, you know what? Now that I think about it, the time that Enclave was there, I was always worried as Toronto after the fistfire bombing that Enclave was going to turn me into Gam. So, you know, my best time on Doug was actually while those 40-person queues were going on, I think, because the RP was still there, even though there was a lot of people who didn't exactly get underground. I don't think they started to get it, and they were contributing. It may not have been in the way that most hardcore role players wanted them to contribute, but there was always something going on where I was concerned. And while all those new people were around, was the same time that the role playing community came together to like start those stories about trying to turn Toronto to the cult of Papa and the fish fry bombing and everything that followed up on that. That was all during that time. So you know what? I'm going to say, I didn't think I was going to say this, but now that I think about it, it was during those times that there was a 40-person queue. Yeah, a lot of people look back on that as a terrible time, but now that I'm really thinking about it, it was the RP was still there. It was pretty shooty back then, but the people that were willing to push forward stories at that time, they were still doing it. And maybe because the world was so dangerous, because there was so many people who really didn't get DayZ Underground. It made that a really really interesting time. And the lowest it's ever been, I think, was I don't remember exactly when it was, but there were times there when there was only 10, 12 people online during prime time. And let me tell you, even during that time, that was the time after Kyle had left, and I was all alone taking care of St. Joe's. And Shield was kind of looking out for me, who were a bunch of degenerates who weren't really good guys, but weren't really bad guys, and they had all kind of come together to I don't even know what their main purpose was, but they weren't good guys. Um, and during that time, that there was only maybe 10 or 12 people online, Andy had just killed John Stallburn.
Yeah.
And I managed to stumble across Andy one night, and her car had run out of gas, and I contacted Shield over the radio and told them that Andy was there, and they were like, "Okay, make sure she waits." I was going to turn Toronto a very, very different way, because I was going to hold her up, and I was going to turn her over to Shield, because John Stalburn, despite the fact that he was Blackpaw, was a friend. Unfortunately, as I was watching over her car, one of my dogs had to go outside and let my dog outside. And when I came back, she was just pulling away, and I never got that. And I never got that opportunity. But that's one of the things that I think is amazing, is that even when the population is nothing, I think there was 6 people on at that time.
It was. Yeah.
Sick can still happen.
It was still. It's funny you mention that, because, as you say it, when I think about it, my favorite times were honestly those times where there was only, 20 people max on the server, and you constant talk on the radio,
Yeah.
and there was stuff going on, but it was really deep stuff going on. All the groups of the Firekeepers had left, and the Black Paw had even split up at that point, and Volca I had been put in charge of Blackpaw and been voted as the alpha of Blackpaw, and Volca had appeared, and Shadow and Felix had made their own wolf group and kind of thing, and then I got assassinated by Andy. I was trying to get her to join Blackpaw. I was trying to get her to be my other, my opposite, my alpha, as Shadow was. So there was loads of stuff going on there. There was only like 20 people on the server.
And that was all happening when population had plummeted.
Yeah.
And that hasn't really happened since. Like towards the end of a wipe, we'll drop down there. But this was like every night for a while. Like DayZ as a whole, I think at that point was
It's like 663 or whatever that was.
yeah. It wasn't good. It wasn't in a good.
I think there's only like 4,000 people playing at one time or something. In the entirety of DayZ.
Mm-hmm.
It was just before the engine had swapped over. Mind when the engine
6.3.
I think it was around 2018-19. It's hard to not say this, but it's just the best kind of DayZ server there is. They're just because you don't have to RP, you can just do what you want. Anybody can come on the server, and it is as what you make it, kind of thing. Some people can go on about, oh, I can't find RP, and it's like, well, you get someone like Toronto who's just finding it left, right, and center. Or you get, I can find RP anywhere. The experienced, the people that have been around for long enough know how to throw themselves into RP, and it starts by getting your mindset out of a kind of DayZ, that kind of vanilla DayZ playstyle of kind of shoot people, take their gear, shoot more people, take their gear, kind of thing, or interact with somebody and then shoot them, or try not to shoot and just talk to people and just interact. And even if you get shot, who cares? Try again. But that's one of the magic. Well, it is the magic about Doug, is that it's a server that's been culminated and created by a community over a decade, and those stories and those characters echo on through the items that you can find in the game, through the tapes that you can find. I still, to this day, pick up Andy's tape, with the one her singing. Mind that song that Tex used to sing, the Sherbrooke now, you know the one. I sit and listen to that tape all the time, and I shit you not, it's almost like tears roll down my eyes in real life, because I really miss Andy. Like, I've not spoke to her in ages, you know what I mean? And I've made so many really, really close friends over the course of this last decade, and it's like friends that are probably they're gonna be my friends forever. Let's not beat around the bush, you know what I mean? And it's like, it's all happened because of this server. You know what I mean? I've met all these people. I've had all these amazing interactions, because of this server. And you've got to remember, it's the community throughout the decade has built it. It's not one individual person. It's little bits and pieces from loads of different people, and they can be as insignificant as you like. As Toronto said earlier on, you can be a fly in the wall and end up after so many years being so important and like a staple of the community without even realizing it.
Exactly. Yeah. Like before the late fall wipe, when the population of Doug like plummeted because we all knew that the wipe was coming and stuff.
Yeah.
I did a few runs on day one, and I had a lot of fun. But what they were like one-off 2-hour runs where I was trying to experience these other servers as I did underground, but what was missing was that underlying story, and
The meaning.
that yeah,
The
and
depth.
and that, yeah, and that's the great thing about DayZ Underground is you stick around for really doesn't take that long. All you need to do is start talking to people in game, like members of groups and other solos that have actually been around for a little while, and you start to realize that there's something way deeper here. Whereas I'm not going to deny I didn't have fun going on day one and running around Berezino, trying to talk to other people who wouldn't talk to me, so I had to kill them. My KD on day one is actually quite impressive.
Well, it's not hard to get a KD if you're just shooting a decent KD if you're just shooting everyone. You know what I mean? Like,
But
it gets boring.
I wasn't. I was trying to talk to people as I would on underground. They weren't talking to me. They would come at me with a hammer. I'd have to kill them. Things on underground are just they just seem so much deeper because there's that lore behind everything.
And it's deeper for people, for all of us here as well, because we've all been part of it. Even if you try to take a break or you try and go away, you can't help but check the subreddit to read a story, or like just have a look to see what's going on, or log in, just have a run around just to get the lay of the land, and then you always just get suckered back in because there's so much that will bring you back.
They always come back. The amount of people that I've seen return.
Like when I heard Samaritan's voice on his new character,
Yeah.
I almost stood up and applauded. Like, I'm so happy.
I never thought I'd see him come back.
Yeah, I'm so happy when I see those old characters come back. Well, old players come back, even as new characters. It warms my heart. It really does.
When I saw Red Star posted a story recently, I was like, holy shit.
Yeah, every time, and she does this to us like every 6 months or so, and every time she does it, I'm like, oh please,
I'm like,
Red
just
Star.
come back down, come south, come south.
I never met her in game, never as
Yeah.
any of my characters, and it kills me, man. Especially as Toronto, because I tried, because I knew that the lucky bastards. I knew I'd be safe there, and I tried, and I never did. And that's to get to go to the next question.
Yeah.
Yeah, I wish I could have met the lucky bastards as Toronto. That is my one regret about them. I went up there a couple of times and I never found them, and then I managed to get my way back to St. Joe's and got myself killed.
Yep.
That's
welcome
that's
to
the
Doug.
thing. It's an OOC thing with it because your timing, because all of LB.
Oh yeah, I know.
That's what I mean, because I was in LB, you know, so I know exactly what their timings are, and I know exactly what your timings are, and they're just too separated by continents, unfortunately. But
You've recently started editing your gameplay into YouTube videos. Is there an interaction that you wish you had recorded that you don't have?
All right, this question is new to me too, so I haven't had a chance to think about this. You know, I like I said, I'm so glad that Justin was there to be on the periphery to the last 6 or 8 months of Toronto's life. I wish I could have done that myself. I really do, because that was such a great story from everybody who forced that story on me. I I wish I was recording back then, and I also wish that I would have got Andy's two one-off characters, because they were both fucking brilliant.
thanks.
But as Toronto, though, right before the Reverend Alessandro video, where I found the Reverend in Cherno, I was on my way south. I ran into a bunch of people on the coast, and this was after the cult had really gotten into Toronto's head. I ranted to all those people that I ran into, and they were all like Doug regulars. I don't even remember who exactly they were. There was a clown there. There was a couple of vigil that I ran into. I was just kind of in a zone where I was like, I gotta push this story forward about the cult getting into my head and wanting to turn me to the dark side, and how they're going to get into all of the community camps and destroy them from within. So I ran into all these characters on the way down there, and I really wish I would have recorded that, or somebody would have recorded it for me. It was a lot of fun, and it really put a lot of doubt into people's minds as to who Toronto really was, and whether or not he had actually turned. It was Guz from the Clowns told me that he thought I was the cultist. He passed that on to the Clowns, who I think passed that on to the 506. It just made that story get bigger and bigger and bigger. Yeah, that's something that I wish could have been shared to a bigger audience. Most of Waldorf's interactions are they're fun, and that's why I like being Waldorf. It's just my way of having fun with the character. There's nothing really, pushing a story there, but that's what I want right now, and it's fun for me, and I hope it's fun for other people. Waldorf is a nice mix. Walt Kowalski, Grandpa Simpson, and the grandfather from King of the Hill.
Thank you so much. We'll have to do it again.
Yeah, this old man's got to go to bed.